He is threatening to carry out a Holocaust like no other, far greater than what we saw in Gaza.
And I put myself on the other side. If I'm an Iranian and I heard that, and I'm talking about like Foreign Minister Araghchi or the Pezeshkian or any of these other people, and I'm being told that he wants to negotiate an end to give freedom to the people.
Well, because the Israeli regime is a part of this war, Iran will destroy whatever infrastructure in Israel that it can in retaliation. But energy crisis, there will be no hope for it to be eased. And the tankers that are in the Persian Gulf, they'll all be destroyed. They'll sink them to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. This is a war of survival.
Literally, Tehran could be vaporized. Is there any concern about that on the Iranian side?
Well, it just shows how sinister the regime in Washington is. It just shows how sinister Zionism is.
Look, I know we've covered a lot of international conflict on this channel, but what you're about to hear is genuinely terrifying. Professor Marandi, an Iranian academic who literally has a bounty on his head right now, sits down with Daniel Davis to talk about what happens if Trump follows through on his threats to obliterate Iran's infrastructure. And I'm not talking about the usual geopolitical chess game here. I'm talking about Trump openly saying he wants to steal Iran's oil, like he claims we did in Venezuela, threatening to send an entire civilization back to the Stone Age, and potentially triggering a global economic collapse that makes 2008 look like a bad weekend. The professor lays out exactly what Iran will do in response, and guys, it's not backing down. It's methodically destroying every oil facility in the Gulf states. We're talking about an energy crisis that never ends, millions of refugees, and the very real possibility of nuclear escalation. And somehow, the New York Times isn't screaming about any of this. Follow the money on that one. Let's get into it.
The New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, none of them say anything when Trump talks about obliterating Iran or when he says they're going to send them back to the Stone Age. None of these media outlets or their journalists, who some of them have millions of followers, go and say this is outrageous. These are crimes against humanity. This is pure evil. I didn't see any of that on the front pages of the New York Times. He is threatening to carry out a Holocaust like no other, far greater than what we saw in Gaza. But you know, the only complaint is that this is a foolish war. The price of gasoline is going up. This is Trump is insane. A couple of senators or a few Congress people have said that this is evil or these are war crimes. It's not war crimes. This goes far beyond that. When he says sending a country to the Stone Age and then insulting the Iranian people time after time, that means to destroy the country. He will fail, I have no doubt, but the price will be high. And the Iranians know that they have absolutely no option but to remain steadfast.
Well, that's one other thing I wanted to talk about, because and by the way, what time do you need to leave? Because I understand you're limited on time.
In about 20 minutes.
Okay, so all right, got it. Because this is, to me, is as important as something you said a second ago. President Trump, both this afternoon in front of the White House and then again during his speech here, referred to the situation in Venezuela. And he said, I'd like, if it was up to me, I would take Iran's oil. And he said, like we did in Venezuela, we're making $100 billion. We more than paid for our war over that time. So that's a really good deal. And, to the victor go the spoils is the phrase he used, making it pretty clear to me. And I put myself on the other side. If I'm an Iranian and I heard that, and I'm talking about like Foreign Minister Araghchi or the Pezeshkian or any of these other people, and I'm being told that he wants to negotiate an end to give freedom to the people or whatever, but I hear you say you actually want our oil. It sounds to me like you have no interest in the nuclear program and freedom for the people. You just want to steal our oil. And so to have any deal, it seems to me, would be to submit and hand over your natural resources to another country, meaning I would never under any circumstances do it. How does that strike you? That
is exactly the point. And also, You don't hear the Democrats saying we should get out of Venezuela and we should return their oil to the Venezuelans. We don't see the New York Times screaming about that. Again, the empire, when it comes to stealing and murdering and slaughtering and taking territory and taking assets, they're all the same. There is no difference. When Trump lost the Supreme Court case over tariffs and he had a press conference, he was angry. He said, "You mean to say that I can destroy countries, but I can't impose $1 worth of tariffs?" And he was talking about Cuba. So as he was strangling Cuba and preventing oil from getting there, and all the hospitals were without electricity, and kids were dying, and people were dying in the hospitals, did you see any mainstream media outlet in the United States say that we're slaughtering kids in Cuba? No, because as I said, the Epstein-controlled media, the Epstein class-controlled media, it's the same Epstein class that controls the government. They control the media. They control the government. There may be different factions. They may have differences with one another, and they have competing interests. But when it comes to empire, they have no sympathy. No one in Venezuela, when they started bombing those boats, or when they went inside the country and slaughtered 100 people and took the president and his wife hostage, no one in the United States, in the mainstream media, in the legacy media, the think tank, said we are the evil ones. And only those who opposed the war were saying, yes, well, Maduro is evil, but we shouldn't do this. No, they are the aggressors. They are the destroyers. Whether it's Cuba, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Syria, where they carried out 15 years of dirty war and helped ISIS and Al-Qaeda to destroy the country simply because that's what the Israeli regime wanted, or whether it's the war with Iran now, this is all a war of plunder and empire. At least they should have the decency to say that, look, we don't care about human rights. The New York Times, The Guardian, The Independent, all of those fake supporters of human rights, those leftists or those on the right, whatever, they should at least have the decency to say that, look, we are 19th century, 18th century colonialists. We're out to take everything that you have. We will slaughter you like we've done in the past, and that's how it's going to be. But to say that they're doing it to free the people of Iran or Cuba or anyone else, it's just adding insult to injury. But the thing is that in the case of Iran, it's not going to work. It's going to bring about a global economic collapse.
Well, and that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next, because there's from all that you've told me here, I mean, it would be irrational and illogical for the Iran to make any kind of negotiation at all, or to give up control of the Strait of Hormuz. That would seem to be irrational. Therefore, I think we can logically conclude that they're not going to do either of those two things. And at 8 p.m. tomorrow night, Washington, D.C. time, apparently Trump is going to start making good on his attack on some of these energy infrastructures are the water desalination plants or the bridges, other infrastructure inside of Iran. He seems to be eager to do that. If he starts to do that, what can the world imagine that the Iranian government is going to do next?
Iran will, because the Israeli regime is a part of this war, Iran will destroy whatever infrastructure in Israel that it can in retaliation. But what is more devastating to Trump is that his proxies in the Persian Gulf, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Bahrain, all of their vital infrastructure will be destroyed.
Okay, so hold on. Let's pause right here, because this is the part that should make your blood boil. Marandi just laid out something that nobody in legacy media wants to talk about. Trump literally stood up and said, "To the victor go the spoils," about stealing another country's oil. Like, he said it out loud, on camera, multiple times, and then referenced Venezuela, where he claims we made $100 billion off their oil while the country collapsed into chaos. And here's the thing. Where's the outrage from the corporate press? Where's the New York Times front page story saying, "President threatens war crime, explicitly states intent to plunder natural resources"? You think if Putin said that about Ukraine's resources, the media would be silent? They'd run that story for 6 months straight. But when Trump does it, when the US empire does it, crickets, complete silence. Because as Marandi said, they're all part of the same class. The people who own the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, they're the same billionaire class that benefits from empire. Follow the money. It always comes back to the money. And listen to what he said about Cuba. The Supreme Court blocked Trump's tariffs, and Trump literally got angry and said, "You mean I can destroy countries, but I can't impose tariffs?" Dude, he said that. He admitted it. He's strangling Cuba, preventing oil from getting there. Hospitals are running without electricity. Kids are dying. And the mainstream media says nothing. Zero coverage. Because covering that would mean admitting what the US actually does. It would mean calling out the empire. And they can't do that because their owners profit from that same empire. This is what I've been saying forever. The corporate media isn't here to inform you. They're here to manufacture consent for whatever war or sanctions regime benefits their donor class. Whether it's Fox News rage baiting you about caravans or MSNBC pretending to be progressive while they ignore war crimes committed under Democratic administrations, it's the same game. Different jerseys, same team. They all serve capital. They all serve empire. And now we've got Trump openly saying he wants Iran's oil, threatening to obliterate their infrastructure, and somehow the conversation in Washington is just, well, this might raise gas prices, or Trump is crazy. Not, this is a crime against humanity. Not, threatening to send a country back to the Stone Age is genocidal language. Not, stealing another country's resources is literally what European colonizers did in the 19th century, and we're supposed to have evolved past that. Let me know in the comments. Do you think the corporate media is capable of calling this out? Or are they too compromised by the same billionaire class that profits from war?
Installations will be destroyed, their gas installation, their desalination plants, everyone will have to leave. These regimes will collapse. They will not survive. Iran will survive. It's a big country. And we've already seen how Iran can resist and how resilient the people of Iran are. We will survive, but these regimes will not. And that will cause a permanent crisis, energy crisis. There will be no hope for it to be eased. And the tankers that are in the Persian Gulf, they'll all be destroyed. They'll sink them to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. This is a war of survival. The United States leaves Iran no option, and especially since these regimes are all partners in U.S. crimes. They are the ones who are giving the U.S. the ability to use their airspace. They're using their territory. They're using their coast, their access to the Persian Gulf to strike Iran. All of the strikes against Iran, even when the helicopters came in and the C-130s came into Iran, they came from their airspace. Without the airspace of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and these oil and gas-rich regimes in the Persian Gulf, the Americans wouldn't be able to fight a war against Iran. So Iran is saying that, well, you're a part of this war. You can't pretend to be neutral. You have blood on your hands. Now they're going to destroy our country through your territory, through your infrastructure. So we're going to do the same to you. We'll retaliate. And then we're going to have a crisis like no other before.
Are there any talks? I would imagine, again, putting myself in everybody's position here, if I was Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or any of these places, UAE, I would be talking to Tehran and saying, hey, don't do this. Don't take this stuff out on us, especially permanent. And then I would imagine that Iran would be saying, okay, don't need to. Then you better get the United States to back off of what they're going to do. Are there any conversations like that going on?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what the Iranians have been saying from day one. But these countries, some of them don't have the ability to do so, or they don't want to do so. Remember, all these kings and princes and royal families, they have palaces in the United States. They have palaces across Europe. They have billions of dollars, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of assets in the West. If their regimes collapse, they're gone. They'll leave the people, and then you'll see millions of people driving towards Europe and across the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, and it's going to get very hot in a few weeks. The Arabian Peninsula will be very hot in a month from now. So this is going to be an extraordinary war. You'll see millions of refugees going to Europe. You're going to see, going through Turkey, and we're going to see the global economy collapse. I mean, it's going to. What is Trump demanding? Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, it is open to countries that are not aligned to the United States. But those countries that are cooperating with the United States, their oil is not going through as we speak. But when that happens, then the Strait of Hormuz is useless. If let's say there's an agreement and if it's open, if there are no tankers, if there is no oil production, if there is no LNG production, then what's the use? So we're going to have a permanent removal of the energy, as well as the fertilizers, as well as the petrochemicals, as well as the market. Because these regimes, when they sell their oil, they send their money to the United States. They buy stocks, they buy bonds, they buy U.S. weapons. That market will disappear. So at multiple layers, the American people will suffer the consequences, but the whole world will suffer. Everyone will suffer a horrific.
Well, that was my next question. Is what about both China and Russia and many states in Asia, actually, because they may suffer more than anybody else, and those in Africa too. I've got some friends living there, and they're already feeling some of the effects of this. But if what you describe happens as a result of our initiating an attack to potentially tomorrow night, everybody is going to pay a long-term problem here. Or is there any diplomatic movement by any of these states to try and intervene between Iran and the United States?
Well, the Russians are benefiting enormously because the price of oil is going through the roof, and they're huge exporters. And in the United States, those producers of oil are going to make a killing too. It's the consumers whose lives are going to be destroyed and their business is crushed. And as I said, the money that comes from the Persian Gulf will no longer be going there. The Chinese actually have the biggest reserves in the world right now. They've purchased a lot of oil, and of course they have the Russians. Ever since the Europeans cut off their oil and gas relations with Russia, they've been sending it to China. So China will be hurt a lot less than anyone else. But how can the Chinese or the Russians or others make a difference when Trump is behaving like a madman? I mean, to people here are saying, they're saying, what did he do to these little girls? What do they have on this guy for him to be so crazy and insane in the way in which he speaks, and to say that he's going to send the Iranian people to the Stone Age? What can the Russians do? The only thing that's left to do is for the Iranians to remain steadfast. But I think we're going to have if he carries out with his threat, because the Iranians are not going to back down, we're going to have a crisis which is, I think, beyond anyone's imagination.
And just, I know you're about out of time here. Last question. In the event that does happen, that President Trump doesn't listen to anybody, he does launch some sort of a big attack against the energy infrastructure.
All right, so this is where it gets absolutely wild. And this is the part the White House doesn't want anyone thinking about too hard. Marandi just laid out Iran's actual response strategy. And guys, it's not what the neocons in Washington are telling you. They're selling you this fantasy where Trump bombs Iran, Iran backs down, we get a deal, gas prices go back to normal. That's not happening. Here's what actually happens according to someone who, whether you agree with his politics or not, clearly understands how Iran thinks. The second Trump strikes Iranian infrastructure, Iran doesn't just hit back at Israel. They methodically destroy every single piece of oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf states. Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, all of their desalination plants, all of their energy facilities, everything that keeps those regimes running gets wiped out. And those governments, which are basically just royal families sitting on oil, they collapse. Their palaces are in London and New York anyway. They'll just leave. And then what? Then you've got a permanent energy crisis. Not a temporary spike, permanent. Because even if you open the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, Iran says is already open to countries that aren't helping the US, what's the point if there's no oil being produced? If all the tankers are at the bottom of the Persian Gulf? If every facility that refines and ships that oil is rubble? You can't just rebuild that overnight. We're talking years, maybe decades. And who pays for that? We do. You do. Every single person watching this who drives a car, heats their home, buys anything that gets transported by truck or ship, you're paying for it. The working class gets crushed, while the oil executives and defense contractors who funded Trump's campaign make record profits off the crisis. Exxon's stock goes through the roof. Raytheon cashes in on every missile fired. And you're choosing between rent and groceries, while billionaires add another yacht to their collection. And let's talk about the refugee crisis for a second. Marandi said millions of people will be on the move. From the Arabian Peninsula, from Africa, from Asia, all heading to Europe, which will also be collapsing economically. You think the 2015 refugee crisis was bad? That was nothing compared to what this would trigger. And the same right-wing politicians who are cheering for war with Iran right now, they'll be the first ones screaming about refugees at the border. They'll create the crisis, then run on fixing it. It's the same playbook every single time. Here's the thing that gets me. Marandi pointed out that Russia actually benefits from this because oil prices skyrocket and they're a huge exporter. China has massive reserves and gets Russian oil anyway, so they're somewhat insulated. But the US? We get crushed. Our allies get crushed. Working people everywhere get crushed. And for what? So Trump can look tough? So Netanyahu can stay in power? So defense contractors can post record quarterly earnings? Drop a comment. Do you think Trump actually understands what he's about to trigger here? Or is he just doing whatever his donors and the Israeli government tell him to do?
Does what you suggested they're going to and just starts methodically taking down all of this, and it has the impact you had, then there will come one of the things that I feared the most from the beginning here is that faced with a disaster, President Trump may then resort to one more escalation of a nuclear weapon to try and bring Iran to the heel, just like they did with Japan in 1945. What would happen in that case? Because literally Tehran could be vaporized. Is there any concern about that on the Iranian side?
Well, it just shows how sinister the regime in Washington is. It just shows how sinister Zionism is. It just shows the world what the reality of Zionism is. That is what you're talking about, the essence of Zionism, something that no one would even contemplate. No one like you or me would contemplate hurting a child. Yet for Netanyahu, for the Zionists, for Trump, and for the Israeli firsters in the White House and in Washington, massacring and sending people back to the Stone Age is normal. That's why the New York Times doesn't react to any of this language, because that's normal for them. Because they see the rest of the world like the Zionists do, like we're all Amalek. And for me, you probably heard, I have a bounty on my head right now. I'd prefer to die standing than to die on my knees. And those people on the streets, when the United States and Israelis fire missiles at these rallies, I published footage of them. People can go back a few weeks ago. There was a famous rally where a young woman was talking about why people are steadfast, why they're chanting God is great, and then that's when they fired a missile. And the crowd did exactly what she said. they didn't run. They didn't stampede. And she continued speaking. You would think that this would be the top news story across the Western world. And this young PhD student at the University of Tehran, she would be invited on all the Western media channels. But she was nowhere because the Western media censored her, because they do not want to show all these young Iranian women and young men on the streets unfazed, unwilling to stampede and run away, because then it becomes clear that this woman doesn't need liberating. This woman is the one who can liberate those who are under the spell of the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime. If you find this tweet, and this clip, and I've tweeted it multiple times 2-3 weeks ago, it's worth having your audience watch it. And it's also definitely worth your audience reading that book, Going to Tehran.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us about this. I'm just praying to God that some kind of talking like this, to at least be putting out there the catastrophic consequences of President Trump acting on his threats here, not just to Tehran, but to all of us, but especially those who may be under the bombs of it, just on a humanitarian level. That's our hope, that we're certainly going to continue to be that.
The Iranians are not going to give up, no matter what. And what this is going to cause is a civilizational collapse, in my opinion, across the world. And we're going to see tens, if not hundreds of millions of people on the move. And whether it's in Latin America, and the North America will be collapsing, but still people will be going down those routes that they've been going traditionally. And the same is true from Africa and Asia to Europe, even though Europe will be collapsing. There will be hunger, there will be starvation. What Trump is doing is just beyond belief. And the evilness of what he is saying and the implication of what he's threatening, you would think that they would remove him from power today. And you would think that the legacy media would be outraged and saying, how in the world could you ever talk about sending a nation with thousands of years of heritage? And what is their crime? Their crime is that in 1979, they became independent of the United States. And then their crime is that they support the Palestinian people. They say no to genocide. The problem of the Iranian people is they're saying no to genocide. Just like they're saying no to the starvation of the people of Cuba, that's the crime of the Iranian people. The essence of their guilt, what is really lying behind the guilt of the Iranian people, is because they're saying Palestinians are not Amalek. They are human beings. Actually, they're the Semites. That is the real story, and that is why we must be crushed.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and giving your viewpoint on this, and we will pray to God that somehow a way can be found out of this and that nothing happens tomorrow night, and then we can just keep on talking, because that way more people stay alive. But we are always unintimidated and uncompromised to bring the truth, even when it's something like this. Thank you for sharing your viewpoint. We appreciate it.
And thank you for all the heroic work that you do.
So let's talk about what we just watched, because that was genuinely one of the most sobering conversations I've heard in a long time. Professor Marandi, who again has an actual bounty on his head from the Israeli government, just laid out in excruciating detail what happens if Trump follows through on his threats against Iran. And it's not some abstract geopolitical theory. It's a roadmap to civilizational collapse. Trump is openly threatening to obliterate Iran's infrastructure, send them back to the Stone Age, steal their oil resources, language that would get anyone else branded a war criminal immediately. But because it's the US empire doing it, the corporate media just shrugs. The New York Times isn't running front-page stories calling this genocidal rhetoric. The Washington Post isn't screaming about crimes against humanity. They're too busy running stories about whatever culture war distraction is trending on Twitter. And here's what kills me about this whole thing. Iran isn't some rogue nation that attacked us. Their crime, as Marandi said, is that they became independent in 1979 and they refused to go along with the genocide in Gaza. That's it. That's what this is really about. They said Palestinians are human beings who deserve rights. And for that, Trump is threatening to destroy an entire civilization with thousands of years of history. Let me be very clear about something. I am not pro-war with anyone. I don't care if it's Iran, Russia, China, Venezuela, Cuba. I am against US military intervention and empire. Full stop. We've spent trillions of dollars on forever wars while our own infrastructure crumbles, while our own people can't afford healthcare, while wages have been flat for decades. And every single one of those wars was sold to us with lies. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, humanitarian intervention in Libya, spreading democracy in Afghanistan. It's the same con every time, and working people pay the price while Raytheon and Lockheed Martin executives get richer. And what Marandi described, the actual consequences of attacking Iran, should terrify everyone, not just Americans, everyone. A permanent global energy crisis, millions of refugees, economic collapse across multiple continents, and the very real possibility of nuclear escalation if Trump gets desperate. That's not fear-mongering. That's just following the logic of what Iran has explicitly said they will do. The scariest part of this interview was when Davis asked about nuclear weapons, and Marandi basically said, yeah, that's the essence of Zionism. That's the worldview. Massacring civilians, obliterating countries. It's normal to them. And he's right. Look at Gaza. Look at the language Trump uses. Send them back to the Stone Age. That's genocidal language. That's the language of someone who sees entire populations as disposable. And you know what? The Iranian people aren't backing down. Did you hear what he said about that rally where they fired a missile and the crowd didn't stampede? They just kept chanting. A PhD student kept speaking. That footage got censored in Western media because it destroys the narrative that Iranians need us to liberate them. They don't want our liberation. They want us to stop sanctioning them, stop threatening them, and stop supporting the genocide of Palestinians. So here's where we are. We have a president threatening to commit war crimes on live television, corporate media that's completely compromised and won't call it out, and a very real countdown to potential catastrophe. Tomorrow night, Trump might actually start bombing Iranian infrastructure. And if he does, everything Marandi described starts happening. And all of us, every single person watching this, we all pay the price. This is what I mean when I talk about following the money. This war isn't about democracy or freedom or protecting anyone. It's about resources. It's about oil. Trump literally said it out loud. To the victor go the spoils. This is 19th century colonialism in 2025. And the only reason it's possible is because corporate media won't call it what it is, and because both political parties are captured by the same donor class that profits from war. If you found this valuable, make sure you're subscribed to MB, because we're going to keep covering this no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think there's any way to stop this, or are we just watching the empire drive off a cliff in real time? Share this video. People need to see what's actually at stake here, not the propaganda version, the real version. Stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.